Love this logo. This has a European feel to it. The Daschle Group. Now I did look this one up. It's a company, um, a public policy advisor company. So they do. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but they advise senators, and it's something to do with energy as well. I don't know. That could be kind of sketchy, but it's got this European feel to it. The way they break up the letter forms in so abstracted, with these sort of block chunks like that, and then the same way with the use of all caps, um, like that, kerned really wide. It's hard to explain what that style is. I see it every once in a while at work. We get European logos because we deal with bankers from London, for example. Um, and I just, this kind of has that look. Okay, it's a simple two color. Um, and again, it's that same idea of like a basic graphic shape to the left of the text, but they kind of reverse the hierarchy a little bit. The graphic shape is bigger, and the text, the Daschle Group, is a little bit smaller than we've seen. Um, and obviously they took DG and sort of made that incredibly simple and turned that into its own abstracted shape. I think this is a super interesting looking logo. It's very artistic, very arty. And normally I would rail against not aligning the top of the to the G. You see how it's skewed a little low like that? There's like more space there in the above the Daschle Group text. Normally I'd probably rail against something like that, but in this case it's just kind of cool because it's just what it says to me is, like, I don't have to follow rules, and it also creates sort of this diagonal line from, the two blue rectangles, which kind of creates a vertical, or I mean a horizontal line. I'm sorry, a diagonal line, and then having the Daschle Group text low like that, maybe just continues your eye down like that somehow, kind of draws your eye into the name of the company in a way. Maybe that's where verbal flow leads where graphic flow leads to verbal flow. Love the colors. Very cool logo. DataCert. They do legal management solutions. It's an okay logo. Again, you've seen this. Simple graphic on the left of the text. Only this time it's not a line center; it's a line bottom. Two colors. SR. Carbon Cycling Wheels and Accessories. This has kind of a European feel too. Very blocky, distinctive font choice. It's blocky, but it's unlike a lot of text choices that you see in a lot of US corporate logos. It's very spread out wide, for example, like stretched out wide letters. It's got it's curviness to it, yet it's blocky at the same time. It strikes this balance, which I really like, and I think the blockiness relates to those shapes in the graphic in the upper right, which appear to be some kind of axle, and because they do primarily wheels and bike accessories, that makes perfect sense. They've evoked the idea of an axle spinning, the center point, something crucial center. Only instead of putting that to the left centered of the text like we've seen a lot of, they put it in the upper right like that. And what that does is that creates a lot of space above the word. You can see that, so if you're blocking it off like I did here, like how I cropped it, and think of this like being in a row with other logos and other rows of logos on top and the bottom of this, it's going to create spatial problems. Like when you're centering this on a middle axis, two other logos, it sometimes is a good idea in cases like this to just nudge it up a little bit, because even though it's technically centered, it appears lower. So it's an example where you could visually align. You bump it up a little bit, so that it looks aligned center. You know what I mean? And I guess that relates to alignment. It's also balance, perhaps. Visual weight. Love this logo too. Very similar in terms of the placement of the graphic. Essentia. Believe it or not, they do some kind of insecticide. You wouldn't know it by looking at this, would you? I mean, it's evocative of nature. I would have thought some kind of a face product or cream or something, but they do insecticide. This may be European too, I'm not sure. Super cool font, I mean, you probably aren't going to find that on the free fonts site, and they may have tweaked it a lot too. It's so cool how the letters sort of stop short like that, and how they're rounded at the edges. Very organic and evocative of nature and movement, but it's soft at the same time, and it relates to the graphic very well. Kerned perfectly, and I love that the two S's seem kind of a little bit different. How they're sort of tilted like that. That may be just how the S's are in this font, or they could have made a choice to do that purposely. I'm not really sure, but it just gives it like a sense of wind, and outdoors to me, grass or something. Simple two colors. Very, very, very cool logo. Very extremely simple. They took like a basic idea of, well, I'm assuming that's their product, the drop. It's not a water drop, it's a drop of insecticide, and they took up the basic idea of like a flower, you know, you know, don't let your flowers be infested by insects. Drop, let Essentia come to the rescue. It's so funny. It's just, but they probably had millions of discussions about how not to make it look threatening. Make it look extremely environmentally friendly, and maybe they are. I guess I didn't really research them, but so again, a very complex thought idea. Like a drop of chemical, inside a flower, and then relate the name of the company to that as far as your font choice and what you do with the text. But in the most simplest terms possible. Exelon, obviously that's a power symbol there, which clever idea. They either found one or tweaked an O, which is the font. You can see that it looks like an O, which is a great idea. A very simple idea, but clever. They're an energy provider. I would have thought computers, but I guess that's a symbol for power, so that makes sense. Great font. I love how the ends, on the letter, most of the letter forms are very round like that. Perfectly kerned. Two colors. Felice handbags. Again, kind of basic, simple graphic, aligned center to the text. A little unusual though. I mean, I'm assuming the name of the company is Felice Handbags, although I'm not sure. Handbags could be a tagline, and you'll see that, like I said, very often. You can use different logos, one with tag, one without. But I like how the handbags is all caps but very small, and Felice is all lowercase but very large. So they kind of doubled up on the contrast there. I think that's very clever, and also use two different fonts. But what they did with the graphic element on the left is related it to the text. It's reminiscent of the letter forms, but it's also reminiscent of a handbag. Kind of like a handle in the edge of a bag, but in the simplest possible terms. You know what I mean? So they took the essence of something and they related it to the font of the name. And then I like how they also created space between the name and the letter and the graphic like that. Would you, most people wouldn't have thought of that immediately to do that, and I'm not really sure if I could make an argument for that. I guess I'd have to see it closer, I'm sure there was a visual reason where it was maybe a flow issue. It was probably emphasizing something they didn't want to emphasize, etc. But maybe now your eyes can get drawn over into the two little swervy symbols, and you can kind of get stuck there a little bit more than you would if it was too close to the Felice text. It creates like a flow of your eye into the main graphic in a way, and it also evokes open. Maybe not knowing anything about their handbags, maybe that's part of the design of the bags. That's a really critical point, something open, I mean, I'd have to research more to know what that means, but I'm sure none of this was any accident. Fender, I have a Fender right now. It's my latest guitar, a Fender Stratocaster. I love it. Jimi Hendrix played a Fender Stratocaster. Classic logo, simple one color. On their website, you'll see this white, I think, over a busy background. Super cool font, old school, instantly recognizable. I mean, this has been around forever. It's branded into the wood of the guitars. The shapes of the letters are evocative of the guitar. If you know what a Fender Stratocaster looks like, it's a very streamlined look, very very lightweight. Gibson. I used to have a Gibson. I had a Gibson SG. But I sold it a long time ago. Which is the Gibson SG is the same guitar that Bobby Krieger from the Doors played with. It's got more of a bluesy sound to it. It's a little bit. The shape of the Gibson guitar is reminiscent of these letters a little bit more. It's not as streamlined as a Stratocaster. It's a little more boxy, but yet still economical and smaller, but yet a little bit bigger. Not as big as like a what am I thinking of? I'm spacing now, but in other words, the letter forms themselves relate to the shape of the guitar, and that's no accident. Very very cool. Classic company. Glee gum. Now this again is reminiscent of like 50s design. Two radically different fonts, and that sort of diagonal script text, that just kind of screams from a billboard, along with that bold, funky font, that's super tightly kerned with a big outline around it. Like you saw that a lot more in the 50s. So this is kind of a retro feel, and it makes one think about I don't know, movies that take place in the 50s. People blowing bubble gum. Innocence. And it's got this sort of candy, the simple circle shape around the Glee. It kind of reminds one of a piece of gum itself, candy, something kind of innocence. Go Macro Bar. Super cool font. They probably did tweak this, I don't know. Seems to kind of flow as if you're riding the lower left part of the G. It's almost like you're on a track, like a bobsled track, and you're riding that along. So they took the letter G and the letter O and they kind of made it one shape. I'm sure that wasn't the font. I'm sure they tweaked it to do that. And that's just the coolest look. And then they differentiated that from Macro by a little bit of space and color differences. And then also differentiated the word Macro Bar, which is not part of the registered trademark. So Go Macro is the registered trademark, Macro Bar is not. So they made that clear by making Macro Bar a slightly different font, all caps, and a lot smaller. But everything's perfectly kerned and just perfectly aligned. They centered the Macro Bar text underneath Go Macro, just tucked it in there just perfectly. And the idea of Go being one shape like that and also differentiated by color and space, that's the idea of go go go. You need energy, for the person that's going to be riding in a marathon. Bring plenty of these along because you're going to need your plenty of energy reserves, right? So great idea, very cool logo. Gretsch. I also have a Gretsch, and again, Gretches kind of look like these shapes. It's a hollow body electric guitar, and so they've kind of evoked that hollowness by having space between the letters, and especially like in the middle of the G, how the G and the H kind of open up like that, and the T kind of opens and spreads out across everything. It's reminiscent of hollow, open, and it's a big guitar, but it's very lightweight. So I think it shows that as well. It's big, blocky, but open and lightweight at the same time. Okay, and how they tilted the letters like that, I think also adds to the idea of like streamlined, open, yet big and bold. Okay, Gretsch is a very cool sounding guitar. It's a very unique sound. Um, a lot of bands have used Gretsches. Let's see, most famously, um, the Stray Cats. Lead guitar player, the brilliant guitar player, I can't remember his name, Setzer, Brian Setzer. He plays Gretches, has played Gretches. Buffalo Springfield, I think everybody who played a guitar in that band had a Gretsch. It's a really cool guitar. HLG, law firm. Anytime you see, name, and name, that's a pretty good clue that it's a law firm. And, it's very conservative looking as far as the choice of this old Roman serif-like font, and you'll see that very often in law firms, because that's the kind of image they want to portray. I love the idea of the three blocks perfectly aligned with the letter forms cut out, and then the row of the full name underneath, and then they balanced out the red by having just a line of red underneath, so perfect balance, perfect alignment, very symmetrical. Two colors. This is obviously an Asian font, and these Asian fonts are pretty wild too. They have a very, very unique look, or they tend to anyways. I mean, obviously the characters are different, but how that swoop shape is just so incredibly abstracted like that. You tend to see the most abstract shapes, and that style where it's to the left of the main headline with a line underneath it, and then the tag like that. You see that a lot in these logos. Isn't that cool to look at though? Very simple, one color. Island Records, a simple two color. Kentico, they do web content management. So the shape there is the graphic is, I guess, representative of solutions, revolving around a simple idea or a single idea. But again, you're seeing a pattern here. This is a very common theme where you've got a very simplified graphic, outrageously simple, to the left centered, and then the text. A very cool font choice. Again, probably tweaked after, and perfectly kerned as well. This is an example where the graphic is weighs a little bit heavier than the word. Keirveiss. This is a cosmetic company owned by a Danish-born guy who lives in New York. It's a New York-based company by a Danish dude owns it, and it's got this European feel to it. Super arty in how they abstracted the letter forms. Purposely sort of really tightly kerned, but perfect, like the spacing, and the A and E bleed up, but it's supposed to. I think that's just the way they do their letter forms. So a very, very unique looking font, for Keirveiss. It's a serif font, but I've never seen anything like that. It's got a big contrast between the thin elements of it and the thick elements. It just gives it this. It gives it this this look that just reminds me of a graphic in itself. Text as graphic, and then they kind of took that idea and they rolled with it. With the KW forms. I mean, they probably couldn't have made the K and the W more abstract. Barely recognizable, but still you can tell right away what that is. They made it as least recognizable as possible, yet instantly recognizable. So that was very, very, very cool. They use a lot of contrast between big shapes and small shapes. Contrasted, what that quote font would be of the shapes on top is contrasted to the Keirveiss font. So I think this is a really, really cool logo, fun to look at. Okay, Mina. This is a very simple logo, but very cool, isn't it? It's a Moroccan sauces, so I guess it's a Moroccan company, and that's what it looks like, doesn't it? It's got a very Eastern feel, and I love how they have that. I'm not sure if that's evocative of a lotus, but it's obviously some kind of organic symbol, probably a lotus, and that stands in for the dot, which is missing in the eye. So again, that's a really simple but clever idea, and they made it extra large and a different color, um, and so that becomes part of their branding. It's this basic shape, very elegant looking font, yet extremely simple. Probably tweaked after the fact. It looks like you know I have a version here that makes it seem a little more distorted than it probably is. But you know, super simple, all lowercase letters, two colors. Molina Healthcare. Again, the idea of that sort of pattern, graphic on the left, text on the right. This time they aligned bottom, two colors. Natural herbs and spices. Notice how the only thing that's black is the leaf, and you see how it takes on more visual weight because it's so dark, and it also draws your eye flow into that shape, So it's visual flow, and not only does it flow you into the leaf, but it flows you into the idea, herbs and spices. I'm not crazy about how the letter N inside the circle, I'm not crazy about that font. I love the font on the word natural and herbs and spices as well. And by the way, I love how the herbs and spices is all caps and natural is all lower. I love that. It's like you can play with these contrasts, like in other words, take contrast, push it to the edge, It's an emphasis of hierarchy. Natural, you want it to be first, herbs and spices second. But because you flipped sort of a natural inclination, like if it's first, it must be all caps. If it's second, it must not be, that's not true. It doesn't, if you play with sort of expectations like that, you can add interest, and it can be something that looks unusual, and that can add, sort of you can differentiate and add sort of an original look to it. And I like that they have space between, herbs and spices, like and is sort of small and all alone down there. Again, that I think adds a rhythm and some interest to it, and it gives it kind of an open feeling. But the N that's used on top, it's just too corporate looking. I don't like it. I would have found a better letter form, a better font for that. One I think that relates more to what's going on. You got a leaf, and you've got these curvilinear, very organic looking letter forms on the bottom that just kick ass, and a circle, which is very organic. And then you've got this slab serif Roman style. It doesn't make any sense, but it's a pretty decent logo. This is an example of a vertical logo. You don't see a lot of those, and I think part of the reason is it doesn't always stack up well when it's with a bunch of other logos like in rows. It can get lost a little bit, but that doesn't mean it can't be one of the great best logos. And I don't want to discourage you from doing a vertical logo. It's just it can create more problems than if you're doing a horizontal logo. That's my point. Green Bay Packers, super simple logo. Two ovals and a big letter G. They made it look like a football. So they took one basic idea. Let's simplify a football shape, turn it into the first letter of the name, Green Bay. Boom. Super simple idea, but a good idea, smart, and a very simple two colors as well. Perfect Potion. I like that. This looks like it was some kind of mezzotint or some kind of print. Like maybe like a lithograph. It looks like a hand. It's very arty. It's got this handmade look to it, which I think is perfect. And obviously the color green, the leaf shapes, the hand. I don't know if I looked up this company, but I believe they're some kind of skin lotion company, and it's almost like you're looking down into a jar of skin lotion. You know, you can put your hands in it. You know, it's got this sort of creamy look to it almost. Probably did that as a vector object in Illustrator. Not exactly sure. Text on a path. I have a video this week showing how to do that. Perfectly kerned. The space between the letter forms is just excellent. The word potion may be a little bit bigger than perfect, but I don't have a problem with that because I think they just wanted to fill the space a little better. But that could be an illusion. I'm not sure. Has this kind of feel like a stamp as well. You know, one color, very simple. Plainsville Farms. It's okay. You know, but it's very professional looking in terms of the space between the letters is perfect. The kerning, it's aligned really well, a very symmetrical, centered alignment. You know, the only exception is the sun and the grass form underneath it are slightly to the right. And the reason they did that is because they're repeating a curve of the V. So again, that's using repetition, repeating what's going on in the letter forms of the main headline into the main graphic image. Okay. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. Again, different fonts. You know, the name of the company is Plainville Farms, but again, Plainville is what they're branding. You know, that's what they want you to take away. The word farms, you know, it's there, it's important, it's the name, but obviously Plainville came first, and the font choice for that word is very organic, you know, and very reminiscent of the open rolling fields. And then the word farms is very, very, you know, sort of corporate professional looking, very aerial. And maybe this is a corporate farm. That would be I didn't look this one up, but I would guess that's what it is. Probably like a big company-owned agri-farm, you know. But I'm not sure. But see, when you have a contrast of the organic, swoopy font like that to the very tight corporate Arial-looking font, you know, usually that Arial reminds one of like a corporate branding. At least that's what it's become. Post-it, classic brand. It's simple, but it looks complex, doesn't it? I mean, this is our product. They branded themselves by doing a simplified version of what the product is, and it's the simplest product as far as shapes go. It's a rectangle, you know, but they made it interesting by skewing it so that it looks like maybe it's falling. You know, like it's a perspective. They bent it, you know, and it's almost an arc now, and that's a very, you know, the colors are bright and bold, and they did this sort of bold drop shadow effect and outline, and then curved it large over the entire Post-it brand text. And I think what that graphic image in the back like that does for me, it's playful, you know. I mean, it's not a playful product, not really. It's very commonly used and just very necessary. But it could be playful. You know, you could leave notes for people, you know, like playful notes, or, you know, I think the idea of something that everybody uses, you know, this is a product for you, everyday person, you know. And then a very blocky, simple font for the Post-it, contrasted with the word brand, which is incredibly thin and a lot more, you know, and spread out, well, a little more spread out. So again, that's a theme we've been seeing here, is this use of contrast between, you know, two words, which may or may not be the entire name. In this case, Post-it is the trademark, the registered trademark, and brand is part of the overall name. You know, so it's weird that you can separate those like that, but you know, look at the contrast. You know, I mean, it's done so well. 3 colors, 4 colors. This is one of my favorite logos ever. This is a Madison-based company, or at least it used to be. It's just the battery the battery lightning bolt is just right in the middle of the O, centered perfectly. You got ray and vac, and then the lightning bolt. It's just the simplest, coolest design. And what's also cool about it is how open the letter forms are. They're white with just a block outline, and they're kerned right up against each other. So there's no differentiation of space in between. It's just one, but they don't continue the outlines. Um, they kind of break it off. So I'm sure there was a lot of work done after the fact. It's not, the font just didn't kern together like this. So it resembles a battery. They took like maybe like a double A battery shape, rectangular and thin like that, and they've kind of recreated it in the text treatment of the name of the company itself. Isn't that clever? It looks like a battery, and it's light and open, just like a battery is usually. They're silver, normally, or gold. But that lightning bolt right in the middle of the O like that, that's one of my favorite logos. Two colors. Remington, you can't get more simple than this. Remington brands, it's shavers. A rectangle. And then a really cool sort of classic font, for the upscale gentleman. For a better shave. But, how did they get to the point where they just decided on a rectangle for their graphic? I mean, how many meetings and versions did they have to go through to get there? It makes one wonder. I mean, I'd have to research it to know more, but so this again reinforces the idea of you can simplify your graphic so much that it may not even resemble the product or whatever the idea is at all. That's okay too, as long as the overall is reminiscent somehow of the idea or product or target market, i.e., in this case, the font is sort of an elegant, more uptown, upscale look to it, and I'm sure that's what they were going for. And also one more thing, the idea of just blocks like that, like one simple rectangle. You do see that in European logos a lot more, where they're just a series of chunks of blocks. So maybe they were trying to appeal to that mindset as well. I'm not sure. Reprise Records. Neil Young used to be in Reprise, I believe, back in the day. It's the letter form of the R. I think that's supposed to be, like a close-up of a typewriter stroke. Because if you look at a typewriter stroke, and there's fonts now, typewriter fonts you can find online, that's sort of what they look like. They're trying to mimic that jagged edge. Like if you ever have a chance to type on an old-fashioned typewriter, if your grandma or somebody has one, type in some letters and then look at it in a magnifying glass, and the edges kind of look like that. They're not very clean. And so that was part of their branding, Bringing something back, reprise. The show is awesome, but now it's time for the reprise. We're going to bring back the genius, So it's a continuity. One color, really simple. And the contrast between the R font shape and the Reprise Records text is obvious as well. Reprise Records is very corporate, very clean, and super kerned. Although it's not as corporate as I've seen. I mean, it's also, it has a sort of a character as well. I mean, it's a corporate company, it's a corporation, but I think even with the Reprise Records text, all caps and kerned like that, it's got a sense of, sort of real, not aerial or too sort of phony. Tata. Tata. This is some global conglomerate. Not even sure what they do. I think they just buy other companies or something. I don't know. It's got this European look to it, the way the Tata text is treated. You tend to see that where the letter forms are super simplified like that. So the two A's don't even have the horizontal lines anymore. And that was either the font or they tweaked it after. I'm not really sure. And then, again, this is a look we haven't seen a lot in my logos here. You don't see a lot of these square looks. But, they've got maybe a relatively evenly balanced graphic on top of the word Tata. One color, very simple, very cool, isn't it? USDA organic, obviously reminiscent of a field, super simple. repetition of the green and white. Varta, I don't know what they do, but they repeated the V form in the main graphic. All caps, very block and very simple and nicely kerned letter forms which appear to be aligned perfectly with the top and the bottom of that block, so it's like one big block. Maybe they do like corn or something. I mean, to me it looks like a seed company or something, but I have no idea. I guess I forgot to look this one up. Virgin Records, another record company. Again, look at the contrast. Super edgy look to their main logo text, and then the word records is reminiscent of a record, like the O is perfectly round and super kerned. So again, that using contrast and pushing that to the edge, all caps, one not, one super edgy font, one super simple and straightforward, one small, one big, one tightly kerned, one really widely kerned. And the placement is perfect. How they tuck the records under there like that. It gives it a nice flow too. Your eyes just go from version to records without a stutter. It's like nice. Wella Professionals. It's a hair products company, obviously. Again, look at the contrast between Wella and Professionals. That's the whole name, but obviously they're branding the word Wella. Okay, so don't get hung up on thinking that if this is the full name of my company or the full name of you, that has to be the same. As far as emphasis. This adds. Not only do you sort of help the viewer sort of understand and take away just what you want to, Wella. Professionals, that's probably not important. You're going to remember Wella, 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 right? But also, it just gives it a visual interest. The contrast gives it sort of a visual rhythm. Super cool font. Relates to the image of the hair with its round edges like that. Kind of organic. And then the Professionals font, it's it's a little bit organic too, but much more thin and a little more simplified and straight away, and very very kerned a little bit wider than the Wella, but tucked to flush left to the Wella text, and then centered above everything is the graphic. One color. Whole Foods, I'm sure you've all seen this one. Simple one color. They made the O in the word whole reminiscent of an organic shape. So again, that's just you take an idea, something organic, a leaf, a plant, and you integrate it into the headline directly by making one of the letters actually appear to be that shape. Okay, that's a strategy that you can go to again and again. And the word market, has got this sort of old Americana look to it. It's almost like an old stencil style. The whole bottom part of it kind of looks like a stencil. Like you're putting that up against the wall and spray painting. And I think that was purposeful probably as well. To kind of a sense of we're of the people. Even though they're a huge company. Fun store to go into though. Yamaha. I have a Yamaha. Actually, I used to have a Yamaha keyboard. Yamaha is a music products company. Super simplified logo. I guess I don't know what's going on with that logo shape, why they pick those shapes, But it almost has this sort of Asian feel to it. And I believe they're a Japanese company. So obviously, that's probably part of it. It's a character, looks almost like a character, and probably reminiscent of some sort of helmet or tower or something like that. So, but anyways, again, left to the all caps text, perfectly kerned, balanced. Where the circle shape graphic is almost aligned perfectly with the top and the bottom of the Yamaha text. A little bit bigger. Yogi T, super cool font, which relates to the sort of lotus image on top, very simple image. Um, it almost looks like they made that the eye again. This is an example where instead of in lieu of an eye, they made a shape which is reminiscent of the product. Um, they turned that into the eye, and then the overall shape with the gradient behind it, that's got to feel like an Indian feel. It's reminiscent of a place and a culture. I think this is a really cool logo, cool font. Like I don't think you'll find a font like that, a free font,